Okay, so welcome to OCD Whisperer Podcast. And today, actually, I have a really special guest, Chrissie Hodges. And so, something to know about Chrissie is that she's a certified peer support specialist in Colorado. She's actually the author of Pure OCD, and she's the founder of OCD Game Changers. Yes, as she's showing the book for anybody who's just listening. She's the founder of OCD Game Changers and OCD Peers. And I welcome to the show, Chrissie.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is exciting. I always love talking to audiences who are interested in hearing more about OCD and the actual OCD experience. So thank you.
Exactly. Absolutely. I'm so glad that you're here. So, Chrissie, you're somebody I mentioned before we jumped on here, but like I've literally referred some clients to OCD peers because I love all the different support groups you have there. And, kind of why I wanted to talk with you is because I wanted to speak to somebody who has lived experience of like, what is it like to actually live with OCD, right? And also the fact that you do so much in the community. So there's a couple of questions that I know keep coming up for folks, and I really wanted to hear your perspective. So one of the questions is, what is it actually like to live with OCD? I know it's a big one. Whatever comes to mind, whatever you feel like sharing.
There's always I need to make sure to preference when I'm talking about this that you are not going to find the key when you're listening to what I have to say. I do not have any words of insight that's going to make OCD go away. And my experience is definitely different than everyone's. But what it's like to live with OCD, I mean, I guess, if I could be really transparent about it, it's, there's a certain degree of worldview change, and there's a certain degree of I guess sadness. So those seem like polar opposites, but I'll explain. So when people ask me what it's like to be in recovery, what it's like to have a mental illness, what it's like to live with OCD, I typically don't always pander to the optimism, which is because I think that we as a society like to package things up as, oh, I went through this, but now I'm over it and life is great. And to the OCD sufferer, this is extremely detrimental because we are such black and white thinkers. So when we say to someone, recovery is so much better, it's so great, life is awesome, then what people have are unrealistic expectations of living in recovery with a mental illness that is lifelong. But I also don't defer to the pessimistic, which is, essentially, I live with OCD every single day because that's terrifying for people. It can be daunting, especially if they're contemplating or pre-contemplating going into therapy. So I like to look at the realistic piece. Why am I, or what is my life like with OCD? I would not be who I am without it. That's the worldview shift. I'm lucky. I went through something, I survived it, and I got to change my worldview at an early age. Not everybody gets to do that. Not everybody ever gets to do that.
Yeah.
In fact, some people live their entire life asleep. I was lucky. I got to see the world in a different way. I think that when we have mental illness, when we have something that really just forces us to face some sort of trauma or identity shift, you have the opportunity to say or see that the world can be different than the culture or the environment that you grew up in. And you can choose that path or not. And I was lucky to be able to choose that probably a decade after my diagnosis and treatment. So the worldview shift came a lot later after a lot of work through stigma and shame, even after being effectively treated. Would I give it back? Would I give OCD back? I see this a lot in the mental health community on a spectrum, all different spectrum of illnesses. Would I give it back? Hell yes. Do I want OCD to be gone? Yes. Would I give back my experience in life to who I am now? No, never. I'm lucky to be able to see people differently now that I know what it's like to experience human suffering.
That's actually a beautiful distinction. That's a really beautiful distinction. Like, yeah, I mean, of course, nobody wants to say like, I have like, yeah, I want to live with cancer. I want to live with OCD per se, but the gifts that it has to
Mhm.
offer, the experience, the lived experience from that. Like, yeah, that's definitely, that's a really beautiful distinction you just made.
I mean, the flip side of that is the pain and sadness that comes with living with OCD. And if anybody is listening that watches my videos, you know that I just keep it real. Like, and a lot of that is, I don't want people to feel like they're left out of the reality of experiencing OCD. I mean, I can only speak for my own experience, but I don't go a single day without OCD showing up. I would, I would be lying if I said that I did. And in fact, for a long time, I lied about it, to myself, and
Mhm.
that, hindered recovery and increased suffering. And so now I want the community to feel like, hey, there's all different kind of paths you can take, and there are always people walking with you. It isn't just this, here's the pinnacle of what recovery is. I never have symptoms again. I don't qualify for the diagnosis anymore. I don't have intrusive thoughts anymore. I just think that's cruel to pander
Yeah.
that message to people, because you don't have the key to what anyone's recovery looks like but your own.
100%. I mean, that right there, I think it's integral, right? Because it's completely different for everybody, right? Some people have intrusions every day. Some people have more. Some people have periods where it can be quiet, and then, like
Mhm.
weekly or monthly, there's surges or influxes, or there, it's
That's
just
right.
such a different pattern for, because we're so individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to answer the question, I think I live at both ends of the spectrum, but to keep it less black and white, most of the time I push in the middle, which
Mm.
is, the ability to see both sides and still exist while honoring the suffering, but also honoring the fact that I'm lucky enough to live in a recovery that doesn't mean that I suffer every day like I did before.
Yeah, wow, that's really beautiful. That's actually really beautiful. And it sounds like it's definitely been a journey over time. Like it's not like it's just some, I think a lot of people sometimes think like, I'll do ERP and some mindfulness, or oh, I heard this thing called ACT. I'll do some of that. And then somehow like poof, I'll be cured. I'll be done. And I think people fail to wrap their head around that, there's a brain pathology. Like it's not like you could just cut your brain open and take that one piece out that's OCD and toss it and be like, okay, I'm done. It's like, no, you have to kind of proactively be relearning and growing and exercising that muscle, um, so that over time you get those benefits.
Well, I think that's also exactly what you're saying is is also the the crux of OCD. When you have OCD, as terrible as most of us do, until we find out what it is, we find out there's a diagnosis, we go through the, maybe I don't have OCD or maybe I do, and then
Oh
I go through
God,
therapy, and that's
yes.
horrible too. Um, I think that the crux is, it's still black and white. If I don't have this, I call it the OCD wall. If I don't have this, then I'm joining life, and life would be great. If I didn't have sexual orientation OCD, I could be happy with my partner. If I didn't have health OCD, I could live my life to the fullest without thinking I might dying tomorrow. That's a wall we're creating for ourselves. And I think by, again, listening and hearing this message that if you get ERP, life is going to be better, it's what we're doing is setting ourselves up to not honor life for what it is. Life is suffering. Life sucks. You know, I mean, life can be great too, but we are black and white thinkers. If I don't have OCD, everything will be wonderful again. That's why most people, when they say, when I'm in symptoms, I feel like I can never get out. It will never be good again. I'll never be happy. And then when you're out of symptoms, I'll never be that low again. I'll never be this.
Yeah, that's right. That's
The
right.
the
Yep.
manifestation of these two opposite pieces is the answer. There,
Exactly, exactly. It's just like a wheel, right? You like on a bicycle. One time, sometime it's up and then it goes down, then goes up, it goes down. And just recognizing that pattern, because like I tell folks, it's very pattern driven. If you can step back, disengage just enough in a healthy way to see and notice your pattern, then you don't have to get completely absorbed by it, but see it for what
absolutely.
it is. Yeah. That's really
And
well.
probably the greatest lesson that I learned, my therapist, Dr. Stephen Phillipson, at the time, he he basically, I kept saying, oh, life will be so great if this, and I was young at the time, I was 20. And he was just like, well, you're going to find out that life is just shitty. And I just did not appreciate that. I was like,
right. In the 20s, you're like, what?
And you don't understand my suffering, Steve. And then, that's probably what I struggled with the most after therapy, is because I still bought into the idea, if only I'm better, life should be great. And life wasn't great, because there was still a degree of healing to do, because I just wanted to believe when the OCD is gone, quote, I'm doing air quotes, when the OCD is gone, then things will be different. When in fact, recovery, I just actually, heard something today from, I think it was Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts, one of the two philosophers, but, recovery in itself is finding yourself. It's recovering. You're recovering who you were. And that doesn't end with behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, I think exactly right. I think that, on the journey, exactly. It's great to learn the tools and the strategies so you can help yourself, but you're a whole person. So, you want to apply those so you can get through those challenging moments, and then kind of come back and look more globally. Okay, what am I learning? What am I learning about myself? What am I learning about my own hooks, my capacity, my ability, maybe where I cut myself short, or like, wow, I had this belief that I could handle it, and now look at that, I kind of did. And I mean, there's so much more to keep uncovering. I always tell people there's such a process of self-discovery and depth. And yeah, you want to have some concrete tools along the way, but keep going, because there's so much more.
Well, especially in the OCD journey, I feel like, because we typically don't honor the trauma that we experience. Nobody wants to honor the trauma. In fact, when you utter the words OCD and trauma in the same sentence, I feel like, majority of the therapists like light matches and want to burn the world down. And what we're doing is a huge disservice to our community by not understanding that there's so many holes and crevices we can fall in the name of trauma. I mean, look at the, the onset of intrusive thoughts, the duration that people experience intrusive thoughts before they know what's going on, then finding out the content of the intrusive thoughts, for God's sake. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but not all themes are alike. If you have POCD and you have intrusive thoughts about your kids 24/7 for 20 years, yeah, you're going to have a lot more trauma than, someone that, and I can say this because I have this, worries about vomiting every day. It's just different. And so by not seeing that, hey, let's figure this out behaviorally, but then here's an avenue for you to heal. Here's an avenue for you to be validated that it sucked living for a decade thinking you were a pedophile or thinking you were going to murder your family. We're really, really letting our community down by not allowing and validating the actual experience of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what you're saying, I'll be honest. So I'm also a therapist, right? And to be completely upfront too, that definitely there have been times that I also fell into that. And I am somebody who also has OCD, so it's been interesting, kind of tug of war at times. But absolutely, I think when thinking back, it's such a layered experience, and even when you first kind of learn that it really is OCD, you still end up doubting, but is it? And so it just takes a while to really kind of wrap your head around it. But then once you do, and you start to kind of look back and can start to connect the dots, I mean, the amount of realizations you have about, oh my God, all of this stuff was OCD. And I could have saved myself all these relationships that maybe got burned, or I could have made different choices and been in a different place, or, oh my God, all that kind of stuff. And then, while you're going through it, I mean, or how many people, I mean, how common is it? Everybody pretty much that I ever work with always says one of the first things is, oh my God, I thought I was going to lose my mind. I thought I'm going insane. I'm like, yeah, I remember distinctly when that first big episode happened in my 20s. And I literally thought, oh my God, this is what it feels like to go crazy. And I think I'm going crazy, and had no clue it was OCD. And I didn't put it all together until 30s. So It was so intense. And then, when you kind of rethink of all that. And at the same time, I think it's extremely important to, have that moment to kind of sit with all that and, oof, like, release and breathe, and then recognize you don't get too stuck there either. Like, keep going. Like, life isn't over, right? Like, we can still show up for ourselves today, and we can still take that step forward and show up for others, and like the advocacy work you're doing, which is beautiful and amazing. So people can really, hear from also lived experience and know, like, you don't have to go at it alone, and that it doesn't always have to mean like it's the end of like your life, like
Well, the grief is real, and I
for
think
sure.
the grief is something that as a peer support, that's what I appreciate and love the most addressing with people. They get behavioral support from therapy, because obviously I don't do therapy, but then to be able to process with someone, I really lost this part of my life. I really missed those milestones. I really
Yeah.
damaged relationships. I hurt people, and just to hear someone say, yeah, I did those things too, but I did it in the name of survival.
Yeah.
Like we were just surviving.
Yeah.
We survive until we know any different. That's
Exactly.
how
Well, it's like
life
you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's like, you have to remember, you can't punish yourself for something you didn't know at the time. You did the best you could with what you had, right? And exactly, there's a lot of forgiveness and compassion that has to come afterwards to kind of attend to that wound. Yeah. Wow. Way deeper conversation than I anticipated, but I love this. This is so good. I want to ask you a question, like, what is it like for your partner? If you don't mind just sharing a little bit about, like, or has your partner shared with you, or I'm sure maybe you guys talk about it open, like what it's like to be a partner with somebody who has OCD.
well, when my husband and I got together, I was already out doing advocacy, and I was already a certified peer support specialist and working in the field. So there was, I already had pretty ironclad boundaries around, if you can't accept mental illness, like we ain't going on a second date.
Got
Like
it.
that's just kind of how it
Good.
is.
Good for you.
Um, but I think in general, I have pretty realistic expectations for my partner or my husband, and I think that this is something that a lot of people, this is another really hard learning curve for people, is what's the difference, or what support do I need? What support do I need? How do I find that support? And where to set boundaries, and also understand what toxic support is. Look, here's the reality. Not everybody is going to understand OCD. And when we inflict the need for everybody to understand, it becomes our problem, not necessarily another person's problem. This is
Right.
why I'm always really careful about how to give support around people saying, oh, I want to tell my spouse, but I don't, well, you can tell, but it's at your own, it's at your own discretion. And B, what are your intentions? Do you want someone to show up to you every time you feel like you're going to grab a knife and kill someone? Like, they're not going to get it.
Yeah.
And understanding that they're not going to get it, but maybe they are a supportive partner that can show up to a certain degree. Well, then what is that line? And we have to be willing to put that line in the sand and not expect someone to jump over it. I think we as individuals with OCD feel extremely misunderstood. Why? Because we're misunderstanding our own brains. Our brains are telling us one thing, and we know that we're not. And so we sometimes don't even know what's real. We feel like we're disconnected from ourselves, and then we sometimes externally look for people to insert that and make us whole.
Right.
It doesn't work. And it doesn't work because my husband cannot understand how to not solve problems by just logic. He can't. And if I expect him to, then that's on me, not him. And I think that's where we get into this push and pull about what support should and shouldn't look like. And I'm really big on having people understand what toxic support looks like. You could strive to have no support over toxic support. If you're,
Yeah.
because toxic support is just making your symptoms worse. And it's also diving you deeper into shame and guilt. I always recommend to people, find a community of people that have OCD, because they are the ones, and then find a few people in that community that are go-tos,
Yeah.
because they are the ones that are going to get it, and you don't have to worry about shame, and you don't have to worry about stigma. And that's why I created OCD Peers. That's why we have OCD Game Changers. That's why there's lots of different forums online. You can even talk to people in the comments section, as long as it doesn't go over into reassurance. We have to have people that understand where we're at. To a degree, if someone has cancer, their spouse can understand until they can. And then you want someone to know, or to be there and say, I have stared death at in the eye as well. And I had to take the risk and do the treatment anyway. That's the person that's going to understand and walk alongside you to help you heal more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, everything you're saying, I think, is exactly on point. And I think that always, especially when you're with a person, whether it's a significant other, a friend, whoever it is that happens to be in your life. Yeah, I think there's definitely that line of one, as I like to say, accountability, because I think every single human, you have to be accountable to yourself for yourself, right? It's not somebody else's responsibility to make you happy or heal. This is your healing journey and process. So if you fall, you have to get up. You can't always have somebody else come and pick you up, right? I mean, you can have somebody support you and give you a hug after or whatever, but you have to actually get yourself up and learn and then take the next step. So there's that accountability piece. And then absolutely, like you said, getting really clear. I think that distinction between what actually would be helpful for me, even though I might have the urge to really want you to answer my questions and give me that reassurance, but I'm going to have to be accountable and say, I really want to ask, but it's best that I don't, or the best way you can support me is helping you hold these boundaries and get clear on that. And then really communicate that with your partner. And you're right. Sometimes partners understand and sometimes they don't, and that's okay. Like, I mean, at least if there's some basic knowledge of, okay, these are things that actually just don't help me, even though it seems like, for anybody else that it would, but it doesn't help me, and just get clear on those and execute them like your little ground rules.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then go from there. So you can actually focus on, having fun together, being loving with each other and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm really lucky. My husband has anxiety too. So to a certain degree, he can get it, but I'm, especially over in the last 4 or 5 years when, kind of my whole world has become OCD, with business and everything else, and being very integrated into the community. I really do kind of hold a separate space for him and the support that I know he can give him. And then I rely on the other people in my life that I know can show up in a way that's healthy, not compulsive, and also just get it because they've been there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I think, unfortunately, we don't get taught that. I remember when I first got treatment, I remember thinking of like my support in like a file cabinet. It was like, okay, when I want reassurance, I'll pull out this file and I'll call this person. When I want this, and that really is how support needs to be. One person can't be everything to us. We have to be able to surround ourselves with a support system and know who to call and who will create boundaries with us as well on, hey, I feel like you're asking for reassurance right now. Or, hey, you mentioned that you might be suicidal. And I'm here to say, we need to do something. We need to let me come get you, or let me come sit with you, or what, we need to have people that can recognize things, and not everybody is willing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. Very true. Thank you so much, Chrissie, for your time and for just going, really in depth with this. I mean, I think it's just such an important, fruitful conversation. And I know that everybody out there listening absolutely goes through these processes. And I think it's just so, so important to hear it, to know that it's real. We experience it, it's validated. And also make sure that you do get support, you do get treatment, and you do keep going. Would you please tell us, where can people find you if they would like to connect to you?
Sure. Like, I do YouTube videos, probably at this point, kind of weekly. I'm at Chrissie Hodges, Pure OCD Advocate. But any of my stuff can be found at chrissiehodges.com. If you want to sign up for a peer group, we run, I think at this point, about 12, and we're onboarding someone else. So we'll have more groups soon at ocdpeers.com. And then if you want to get involved in advocacy or nonprofit stuff. OCD Game Changers is a nonprofit that I am the executive director and founder of. We have all kinds of initiatives, all related to OCD, and always looking for help and volunteers and new ideas. So that's
Awesome.
OCDGameChangers.com.
Beautiful. And of course, I'll include that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Chrissie.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Bye.